So it turns out free stuff actually costs money. Color me shocked, as New York City's mayor Zohran Mamdani has just unveiled his preliminary budget at City Hall. Now, the proposal outlines two options. Either Kathy Hochul, New York's governor, approves Mamdani's tax increases on the wealthy and corporations to fund his socialist utopia, or Mamdani has said he will raise property taxes on the very residents he said he was fighting for. And so New York City is about to find out that free promises always come at a cost. As always, ladies and gentlemen, if you are enjoying the content, smash the thumbs up button. That's the best way to let me know. And to stay locked in with future videos, make sure you subscribe to the channel and make sure to turn those notification bells on, because YouTube be acting kind of freaky with it and not updating you guys, as I've heard from a lot of folks reaching out to me. So turn those notification bells on. Let's get into it.
Governor Kathy Hochul, she is giving some big financial relief to New York City ahead of Mayor Zohran Mamdani's presenting his first budget today.
But is it enough, Robert Moses?
Yeah, they still have a big budget gap to close despite this infusion of state money, Rosanna and Tina. Mayor Zohran Mamdani is set to present his first preliminary budget this afternoon at 1:30 down at City Hall, which will provide a window into his priorities. By law, the budget has to be balanced, meaning that revenues must equal or exceed spending. Ahead of that presentation at City Hall this afternoon, yesterday, Governor Kathy Hochul announced she is giving the mayor $1.5 billion in state money over the next 2 fiscal years to help plug the city's 2-year deficit of $7 billion. So do the math. That means the city still must close a $5.5 billion hole.
New Yorkers are used to fighting between the governor and the mayor. What you're seeing now is a semi-coordinated non-fight to accomplish some of the goals that both the governor and the mayor have. She's trying to get ahead of, rallies and pushes and cornering around tax the rich. On the flip side, he gets all this money that mayors don't usually get to do with and use for programs that he's been campaigning on. It seems like a win for him. It seems like a win for her, and hopefully it's a win for New York State taxpayers as well.
Yeah, and so you heard that. And so Kathy Hochul is going out her way to give Mamdani even more money. But Mamdani still says it's not enough. And let's not get it twisted. Part of the reason she's doing this is, yes, it's an election year. So she doesn't want to raise taxes. She doesn't want to do that, but she also is thinking about Mamdani's base, voters, that whole thing. But now Mamdani is threatening to raise property taxes on homeowners if she doesn't grant him his tax increase on the wealthy and corporations. Check it out.
But I want to be clear. $5.4 billion is still a very steep mountain to climb. And there are two paths that we can walk. One that offers long-term stability, and a second one with significant pain that we deeply hope to avoid. The first path repairs the structural imbalance between the city and the state. We want to work with Albany to raise personal income taxes by 2% on the 33,000 New Yorkers earning more than $1 million a year, and to raise corporate taxes on the most profitable corporations. And we know that for far too long, New Yorkers have given far more to the state than what we have received in return. It is time to end the drain. If we cannot follow this first path, we will be forced onto a much more damaging path of last resort, one where we have to use the only tools at the city's disposal: raising property taxes and raiding our reserves. This second path is painful. We will continue to work with Albany to avoid it. This first path will deliver the structural change that we need to recalibrate the relationship between the city and the state. Because as we know, New Yorkers contribute 54.5% of state revenue, but receive only 40.5% back. At the same time, New York City's portion of the state's GDP has grown by nearly 10% since 2010. That imbalance is untenable. Once again, I'm calling for Albany to end the drain. There is no third option of failing to balance the budget. By law, ever since the fiscal crisis of the 1970s, which placed the city on the brink of bankruptcy, New York City has been legally required to balance its budget. We will do so. If we cannot pursue the first path, the only option we have remaining is the second path. At the heart of this path is a property tax increase. This would effectively be a tax on working and middle-class New Yorkers who have a median income of $122,000. The second path also requires us to raid our reserves. It would mean withdrawing $980 million from our city's rainy day fund in fiscal year 2026 and $229 million from the Retiree Health Benefit Trust in fiscal year 2027. These are steps that have been taken before, but only in moments of extraordinary external crisis. Mayor Bloomberg's response to the 2008 financial collapse and Mayor de Blasio's response to the enormous revenue shortfall caused by the pandemic. We do not want to have to turn to such drastic measures to balance our budget.
Yeah, so you know what's so fascinating about this? There's literally a third path, but Mamdani does not even want to acknowledge it, where he cuts spending and he reins in government programs. But instead, Mamdani is basically trying to hold the governor hostage in the sense that if he doesn't get what he wants, as you just heard him say, then he will raise property taxes. And in an election year for the governor, that could spell trouble for Hochul. And ladies and gentlemen, herein lies the problem with the Democrat Party and why New York is cooked. The solution too many times is to raise taxes to solve problems and create more government programs when they should be looking to cut spending and be more fiscally responsible. But you know, when you go around campaigning on how you're gonna get the rich to pay for everything, and then you can't actually make that happen, now look at who ends up paying. Homeowners, average citizens who are about to find out what progressive Democrat policies look like firsthand. And this is the same playbook. Let's not forget. Brandon Johnson played this same playbook in Chicago, promising to tax the wealthy. Then when he got into office, he couldn't, and he tried to raise property taxes on Chicago residents. Now, the city council stopped him initially, but due in part because of the business exodus in the city of Chicago, property taxes still went up for many Chicago homeowners. And now New York is going through a similar issue. And here's the thing. The problem isn't with New York's revenue. No, it's the spending. And that's what gets broken down in this clip. Take a listen.
And speaking of taxpayers, despite the mayor's pleas, the governor has resisted calls to raise taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers as she runs for re-election. While Mamdani renewed his call for raising taxes last week on Tin Cup Day in Albany, he is notably not expected to attend a Tax the Rich rally in Albany that's scheduled for next week. The president of the Citizens Budget Commission urged Mamdani to focus on belt tightening to close the remaining budget gap.
Increasing taxes risks alienating businesses who create jobs and wealthy New Yorkers who actually fund a lot of our schools, our cops, our sanitation. So let's dig into all the agencies and find the spending that's not improving New Yorkers' lives and shrink it.
And so what reports are saying is that Mamdani is proposing another $1.2 billion in migrant spending in New York City. And so, yeah, whether that comes from the wealthy and corporations or homeowners, property owners, he's making it clear that he will get that money somehow. But let's go ahead and jump into this next clip where Zohran Mamdani wants another $1.2 billion for migrants in his proposed budget and wants to raise New York City property taxes and will raid the retiree health care fund to do it. Take a listen.
Mayor, I had two questions also. One of the ways you're balancing the budget, as you've said, is to pretty significantly draw down these reserves. They're, generally intended for even more dire times than this one, perhaps, like a recession. I'm just wondering if I know this is just your first offer and there's a negotiation coming, but how committed are you to drawing down the reserves as substantially as you have in this? And my second question is, when do your labor negotiations start, and have you budgeted any kind of placeholder for that?
So I'll start with the first question. If we can actually bring the slide back to this, exactly, right here. So what the second path forces us to do is to utilize the rainy day fund and the Retiree Health Benefits Trust Reserve. Now, as you can see in fiscal year 28, we do put investments back into those very reserves because we want the city to be on firm financial footing. However, there is a reason that we did not include these in our city's attempts to get to $5.4 billion, because these are the rating of reserves that we do not want to pursue. These are the kinds of reserves that what we would rather do is ensure that they remain as they are so that the city can be on firm financial footing. However, in order to get to this point of closing the gap on both this fiscal year and the next fiscal year, we are forced to raid the rainy day fund, the Retiree Health Benefits Trust Reserve, and to increase property taxes across these other years. Do you want to?
Yeah, so you heard that. And so this is certainly going to have an effect on the very people Mamdani was supposed to be making life better for, not just the poor he was fighting for, but the middle class, who felt like they were getting left out. They were getting left behind, right? But now you have New York City Government officials saying that Mamdani's proposing a regressive tax that will hit communities of color much more than it hits homeowners in wealthier areas. Take a listen.
Inequality, and it's essentially a regressive tax as it's currently structured, hitting homeowners in communities of color much more than it hits homeowners in wealthier areas. So this should not be anyone's choice of how we solve this, nor, by the way, should drawing down reserves. This is probably not going to get a lot of attention because it's kind of technical, but in my opinion, we already didn't have enough reserves in the city with the budget of $120 billion, and we're entering into a period of a lot of uncertainty, economic uncertainty, partly because of all the chaos in the presidency.
Seniors are most vulnerable. Seniors who absolutely done everything. They've built these cities. This wasn't your HRA workers. These are your NYPD officers who really have done everything to build home ownership and generational wealth. And this is certainly a setback if this 9.5% increase happens.
Is it particularly a non-starter to do this before there's any real effort to reform the system, which has been long promised and long overdue?
I agree, and I sat on the property tax task force, so I was encouraged to hear the administration and the mayor speak of some other options on the table, including looking at assessments. So we'll see what Albany comes back with. But the bottom line is we should not arbitrarily put the city's budget on the back of everyday New Yorkers.
VP, thank you very much.
Yeah, this is just fascinating to watch in real time. This guy got elected on the classic pitch. Let's not forget, I mean, it wasn't that long ago. Free this, free that, don't worry. I'll get the rich to pay everything. They'll front the bill. That was his entire sales job. As if the money was just sitting right there waiting to be redistributed. And your life, if you were in New York, was going to get a whole lot easier. But now we're not even 90 days into his term, and the tone is already changing. And who ends up holding the bag, right? It's the regular homeowners, the middle-class residents, the people who can't just move income around or relocate or write off their way out of the hit. But that's the socialist model in a nutshell, right? Promise the benefits up front, sell it as someone else will pay, expand programs and bureaucracy, and finally, when the math doesn't work, raise taxes on the broader public and call it fair. And here's what makes it worse, ladies and gentlemen. Those property taxes, they're not just going to hit the homeowners. They ripple. They're going to hit landlords who pass them on to renters. And so the rent's going to rise. Cost of living is going to go up. It's going to affect small businesses. And so everybody's going to get squeezed. And so we're just going to continue to watch what happens to another once great city due to progressive Democrat leadership and policies. But that's my update and my thoughts. Now let me hear from you. Drop your comments down below. As always, you enjoy the content, smash that thumbs up. That's the best way to let me know. Subscribe and stay locked in with more content in the future. Until next time.